Well, I want to welcome everyone. I think we're just going to get started and watch as more people join us. Welcome to our first virtual University Day. And we're very excited actually to welcome, well, all of you, but especially Karen Cooper, our alum 2006, and her co-director, Kevin Rumley, who are both here to talk about their new film that just recently came out, No Alternative. And I just wanted to welcome everyone to University Day and say how happy we are that you're here and able to join us. The circumstances are what they are, but on campus, the mood is pretty good. We're really happy to have our professors join us today. I see a number of their smiling faces, and our students as well. And they're a little bit all over the place, both students and professors at home. And they're doing just a really great job. And so we wanted to make sure we continue with the community spirit and not let University Day go to the wayside. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to pass the microphone now to Patrick Savot, who had the great idea of inviting Karen, and she was supposed to come to campus, but this was our next best alternative. And so we do hope to have her here in Lugano in the not too far off future. And Patrick, I'm going to let it over to you. Just a word about the organization. Right now, you're all muted. We're going to have Patrick start with some questions, and we've asked Daniela Bayardi and Letizia Stefani, two of our wonderful students who are very involved in the art world and in art courses at Franklin, to ask some questions, and then we're going to open it up to the broader public. Okay? So enjoy.
Hi, Karen.
Hello.
I'm very happy, that we finally, have you, to talk about, your documentary, along with Kevin. For the sake of time, because I know there will be, a lot of questions, I just have two quick questions. So you graduated, as a late major, and you wrote, your thesis on Marcel Proust. And I wanted to know, what brought you, to be interested in alternative art, beside what your bio says, as you were part of a collective, art collective in Neuchâtel. So that's my first question. And the second question that you can divide, with Kevin, maybe would be, what were the difficulties you encountered, in making this documentary, especially, from a financial point of view, since, you resorted to crowdfunding. If you could explain, to maybe students, who would be interested, in doing, ongoing on the same venture.
All right, so I'll start with the first question. Yes, I wrote my thesis on the development of the main character as an artist in Marcel Proust's À la recherche de temps perdu, and also looked at Proust's definition of art. So I do think, when I first came to Franklin, I thought I was going to be a studio art major. So just to say, I think the arts have always been really important to me. I've always, my family's pretty artistic. My dad's a photographer, and that's just always been part of who I am. And I sort of naturally fell into the alternative scene in Switzerland. The first friends I made when I moved to Neuchâtel were part of an art collective there. And I mean, I had never really, I want to say they just welcomed me with such open arms, and it was so cool to see all the fun, creative stuff everyone was doing. It was really inspiring. And yeah, people who know someone else, word of mouth, and then you meet someone else and you see another space. And I started to realize like this was bigger than just our group of friends who had a thing. And this was something that was all over Switzerland, and I honestly believe probably all over the world. And it's kind of a movement that's been going on probably since the dawn of humanity to some degree. But yeah, I want to say in some ways it was a natural progression. And yeah, something I'm extremely passionate about and always have been. So
second question then, so the difficulties and that you encountered, making this doc.
Yeah, Kevin, do you want to jump in on this one? Or do you want me to answer? You're on mute. Kevin, you're on mute.
Please.
Oh, there you go. Go ahead.
I'm back.
You're back.
Hi everyone. Yeah, we had a lot of difficulties. I think the first difficulty we had was a lack of experience at the beginning. We didn't know how to look for fun, how to finally produce a movie, and we wanted to learn by ourselves. We wanted at the end that we learn through doing, learning by doing, the DIY process. We wanted to follow this kind of idea of this alternative culture. They learn by doing by themselves, and we wanted to do the same. But to do the same for a film is not exactly a good idea. You need money. Even if we had like 3,000 Swiss francs for 4 years, we did it. But we could save a lot of time if we had money to pay some people and some material we needed. I think the first problem was the lack of experience, and actually it's not a real problem because we learn really so much, and now we can produce and distribute a movie. I don't know if you want to complete.
No, that's fine. So I mean, except if Karen wants to add something, but we can move into the students' question.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something about the crowdfunding. Towards the very end, we did launch a crowdfunding campaign at the end of 2019. We raised 8,500 francs. That money went towards hard costs that there was no negotiating on, you know. I mean, we had friends who helped us with the sound mix, who helped us with the editing, who loaned us equipment. Like everywhere we had friends who could help us bring this film to life, they did. But there were some hard costs that we couldn't negotiate, like archive footage licensing, music licensing, the cost of the Adobe Suite, DCP exports, which is a special format for theater releases, a lot of stuff that we hadn't really anticipated. And the crowdfunding made it possible for us to really finish the film, get it done, get it out there. We had over 100 people contribute to our crowdfunding, many of which were part of the Franklin community, so thank you for that. That was Professor Savo is one of those people I would like to add. But yeah, so it really truly was a group effort. I know Kevin and I, our names are on there as co-directors, co-producers, but this film would not have been possible without help from, I mean, hundreds of people, I would say. So, and actually I'm proud of that. I think that fits with the spirit of this film.
Thank you very much. Sarah, do you want to jump in?
Do we want to maybe let Daniela begin? I've marked where you
are.
are.
Daniela, yeah. Let's start, with a couple of questions with Daniela.
I think Letitia's gonna go first. I think, but okay. So let's get started. Welcome everyone. I'm Letitia, and my first question is: so the writer Dostoevsky wrote this famous quote, "Beauty will save the world." So my question is, in your opinion, what is beauty? How will you connect art with this famous quote? And most important, will art save our life?
Kevin, do you want to go first? Or you want me to go?
Question, but I can start and I let you end, Karen. I know you're good to, to complete. What I learned during this shooting concerning alternative culture, the most important is that the place brings people together. It's a place to meet other people and to exchange. That's the first point of these places. And I think that's a beautiful part of art. It's like to bring people together and to construct something new, different, or original, or whatever. And yeah, I would say that. This is the first question.
Okay. Yeah, I think my response to that would be, I mean, I think that there's also the saying that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I think that we may each have our own definitions of what beauty is, but it is something we instinctively recognize when we see it. And something that art does is bring beauty to the forefront. Not always beauty, but it can bring beauty to the forefront. And it is true that having people come together around that, and two people being able to look at something and say, that's beautiful, that is part of the power of art. And I do think at the end of the day, being able to find the beauty in your surroundings and in your situation will save our lives, especially in this time. I think being able to see the beauty in the difficult is what's going to help us pull through this.
Thank you so much. And I guess Daniela has another question.
I really liked how you introduced the documentary with the cultural context with what happened here in the 80s. But my question regards mostly on why you use the interview of
Détermeyer.
Yeah, in the beginning, and how I guess it's pretty much because of what he says about the cultural alternative cultural movements in Switzerland. Yeah, I just was wondering why you use that specific interview and how I guess it applied to the whole documentary. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would say, so part of what we wanted to do in this documentary is show how creative spaces like these have been around for a long time, and how they lead to an emergence of talent. And essentially there's quite a few artists out there today that wouldn't be who they are if they had not had this experience in an alternative space. And Dieter Meier is one of those people. We did have some struggles. There was a longer interview with him, but unfortunately archive footage rights are a thing. And we wanted to have, there was an interview with Manu Chao as well. We have an 80-minute version of the film where we kind of dive into that a bit more. But yeah, he had some unique perspectives on Switzerland as a whole, and he was part of the Geneva squat movement, and he went on to become, world-renowned musician producer, and that was part of the reason why we wanted to use his interview. I don't know, Kevin, do you want to add anything? Or?
Yeah, we wanted to see that people can also live from what they love through alternative space. I think it's one of the points. It's why we show like 3 or 4 people who are becoming famous through squat or this alternative scene. And I think also what he says resume what alternative means, that in Switzerland at least, because Switzerland has another way to do, and it's really a lot of small movement independently creating a big movement together. It's not attached. And yeah, I think it was important for us to have it because it's bring something on the table directly about what is alternative in Switzerland. Yeah.
Thank you.
So maybe we could open up for some other questions as well. And I see some faces who I think probably have lots to add. So maybe Johanna, you'd like to ask a question?
Yeah, hello everybody, and thank you for a virtual university day. This is really great, connected all over the world. And thank you for giving us the chance to screen this film, to watch this film. I watched it really, really attentively, and I have a million questions, but I would like to follow up on what Kevin just said and Daniela asked. So my immediate reaction was like, why is this so important in Switzerland? So I think, Switzerland has a very active arts community, of course, but why is it so important to show alternative spaces within the Swiss culture?
Kevin, do you want to start?
I know that Karen, you were part of an art space like that. So I guess it grew out naturally. But I personally find it incredibly important to show this. But I wanted to hear your and Kevin's perspective on that as well.
Yeah, Kevin, go for it.
Yeah, like Karen, I come from a small structure called Lampadaire in the area of Neuchâtel. And we were a bit born in this alternative movement. We knew a little bit about it through our own space. And I think it's very interesting in Switzerland to see an alternative way to do things as capitalists. For me, Switzerland and maybe America are the most representative country in the world who represent what capitalism means. And it's important to show in these countries, especially in Switzerland, that there is other way to think, to live, to believe, to do things. And most of the time, we have a bad image of people like living in another way. We think, oh, they are stinky, they take drugs, they make a lot of noise. And what we wanted to show in this movie is to give back the image they should have. Like it's very intelligent people who speak about passion and really love what they do in another sorry, my English sometimes, in another way. And for us, what's really important to bring back this image, this negativity image we have because of media, of politics, who speak always bad about it. And our documentary wanted to show it in how it is really. I think that was, for me at least, the most important in this documentary. What about you, Karen?
Yeah, I agree with Kevin. I think there's a lot of negative stereotypes about people who live their lives alternatively. I mean, if you're not going with the flow, you're probably upsetting somebody out there. We wanted to kind of disperse some of those negative stereotypes and prejudices that are associated with the underground art movement, and show that these are people who are smart and serious and passionate and capable, and that this is a choice for a lot of people to consciously remove themselves from a system to create their own system. And for me personally, I found it really, really inspiring to see all the amazing things that people are capable of, and how you give someone some space and a community to work with, and people will really do amazing things. And I thought that that was empowering, and I thought that people needed to see that and know that that's going on in their own backyards, especially for the Swiss. I wanted them to see that this is happening, and that that they should support these movements in their local community. And I also wanted the artists to see that they are not alone, that there are, I mean, most of them, they didn't even know about the other spaces, many of the other spaces. There's a couple that are very famous, the Geneva ones, but the other towns, I mean, people had no idea. They were like, oh, cool, I didn't know there was a space like that in Montreux or like Moutier. Or so like part of the idea was also to show the artists, like, you're not alone in what you are doing. And I mean, I really believe like with our powers combined, we have greater strength to affect change. And so, yeah, part of it was also for them to show that like, you're actually part of something much bigger than yourselves. This is what I consider a global movement. And I wanted to highlight it because I think they frequently are subject to negative prejudices and don't get the recognition that they deserve.
Thank you. I have a million more questions, but I'll let other people go.
Patrick,
Oui, I have a question, but
why don't you go, and then we'll go to the, and I also just put in, if you want, or if I don't see you, because now there's way more people than we have room on a screen, do write a question in the chat if you want to ask a question that I haven't seen. But I know Patrick and Daniela and Letizia also have more questions. So.
Karen, I'm going, to to be the advocate's devil. At the end, of your doc, there is, a few sentences about, the difficulties, that some of these spaces, are meeting, are struggling with. And what I wanted to know is that if you are optimistic, that these spaces, can survive and not be met, with people like, promoters, etc., etc. Because one thing, that characterizes, the movement is at the beginning what you say: autogestion, autonomy, anti-conformism, anti-consumerism. So how do they face that, these forces?
Great question. I think ultimately I am optimistic because, as I say in the documentary, for every one space that closes, 2 new ones will open. Like, I believe that this is part of who we are, and I think it's inevitable that this cycle will continue. That being said, it does seem to be, no matter where I go in the world and I see these spaces, they all struggle with the same thing. I mean, almost all of them are in dilapidated buildings that have been left aside, and because someone can't see how this building would make a profit, artists take it over, transform it, the community starts to change, you have gentrification, now suddenly the building value goes up, artists get kicked out, and the whole cycle repeats. So on the one hand, ultimately I'm optimistic, but I think the struggle is a bit eternal, and I think it can only, it helps to have recognition from authorities or the city, even if it's as simple as, okay, you are a legit cultural space. That sometimes can be the make or break for some of these spaces. But keeping the commercialism aspect out of it and the promoters, I mean, that I know that the space in Geneva was approached by Red Bull, for example, who wanted to sponsor some of their parties and some of their public events. And they held a meeting for all of the associations and asked them what they wanted to do. And they said no. They said, we don't want Red Bull to be a sponsor of our events. So, and that was their choice, and
so would you say that these artists don't see these alternative spaces as a stepping stone towards more institutionalized spaces, that they like because there's a sense of community, there's a sense of living together, and so do they like that type of socialization, and they don't want to move to a more institutionalized way of doing art from the people that you met with?
I'll say something and then I'm going to pass it to Kevin. But I just want to say that I think every artist makes that decision for themselves. There may be some in the space that are there because they have access to an affordable studio and their goal is to live off of their art and get a gallery exhibit, and they're free to do that and pursue that in their own way. But then for those who aren't there to make it a stepping stone in their career, and they are there for the community and the experience and just like being creative with other people and having a judgment-free environment where you're just free to be a little weird, and it's a safe space. Some people like it just for that. And I think so whether you are involved on a community level or an artistic level, or I don't think it really matters. And I think that these spaces provide options down both of those paths for people. Okay. Kevin, do you want to add anything?
You say everything already, but I can speak about one place in special, Le Pantographe, who was expulsed. I don't know. Cannot stay at the same place. They're looking for a place since 3 years now, and they found a really big place where they want to stay, but already have problem because squat is illegal in Switzerland, and that's changed last years. It was much more easier 20 years ago to make your art in a space and occupy a place than today. That's a reality. The alternative of today is not the same alternative of 20 years ago. It changed. But it's like everything. I think going to the market is an alternative as well. It's not exactly the answer the question you asked, but we find other way to make alternative today. For example, I like this February without supermarket alternative to try to the local markets. It's the same, I think, with art. They find new way to exist, like sharing a place they pay. Today it's most common, But the photograph, for example, try against politics and everything to stay in the place they occupy since November now. They were expulsed 2 times, and now there is coronavirus, and they cannot expulse them because of safety and everything. Maybe they can catch it in this way. So you have to be creative and have some luck to find a space for your ideas, I think. It's the same in Neuchâtel. Hutsen have to leave, but the city of Neuchâtel see the documentary and want to help them now because they understand the idea behind this, and we have a new picture of it.
Bravo.
I think that helps a bit to spread the word.
So now we have a lot of good questions. Maybe Laura, we'd love to hear from you. You have to unmute.
Hi, everybody. It's good
Hi,
to
Laura.
see your faces. I admittedly, I've talked with Karin, being a good friend of hers, extensively about this, but I haven't had a chance to ask in the last couple of weeks as the situation has unfolded globally about whether or not both you, Karin, and Kevin, think that now the situation is almost ripe for a lot of these new alternative spaces to start to grow organically, considering what's happening. And so my question is, do you think that more of these alternative spaces will start to kind of sprout, given the current economic and social situation we're in globally? And now, do you think that these spaces will be received differently, considering what everybody's going through? So I'll mute myself and just listen. Thank you.
Kevin, you want to go?
Yeah, I can try to start it. I think the biggest problem of alternative space is that they are not, for the economy, not rentable. They don't bring a lot of money, even if they are spare a lot of money, as not needing a lot of subvention and money. They just do it even if they don't have money. And I forget actually the question.
Oh, if because of coronavirus, do you think this has created a situation that will help more spaces kind of pop up organically?
I don't really believe so. I think there will be a change of changing the mind of a lot of people on how to live and how to see the world, but not on how to construct institution, if we can call it like that. It's alternative don't want to follow how the society work, and if society accepts them, then they already have a problem. In a way, it's quite a contradiction, but it's a way to do something in a different way. And I don't believe the government of Switzerland will go in the way of alternative culture or anything. They want to grow up the economy, and maybe it will change. I cannot read the future, but I don't believe it will really help. It's for photograph, it's really special because they are here since months. I don't believe other people will take a place and squat place because police will come and say, hey, you cannot stay at more than 5 here, even if it's house. You don't have authorization. You need authorization for everything in Switzerland, other in most of them. Yeah, I let you, Karen, now take it from here.
Yeah, I think in my mind, it's very hard to predict the long-term impact that this will have, but obviously it's impacting our ability to come together. And I think that that's a huge part of why these spaces exist, how they function, and, you know, the power of them. So as long as we are unable to come together, I do think we'll see a certain stagnation across the board in all industries, including art and including like underground culture. Because yeah, a huge part of it is the community and the inspiration you get from seeing other people do their stuff. And there will be like a dance party going on and someone's painting while that's going on, you know, live painting while you're having your dance party. And I mean, that's maybe not going to happen for a while. So I'm not really sure what this holds for the spaces. Big part of what to be included in the film, the spaces had to have art studios on site and they had to host events that were open to the public. So right now, probably, unless it's a very small space with just a few artists, I don't know how they're getting into their studios and doing work, maybe, you know, coming in one at a time or something, but they're definitely not hosting public events. So I don't know. I mean, I personally hope that the situation, and the film ended on this note. It ended on the note of asking yourself the question, like, what do I want to do with my life? Like, why am I doing this? And that questioning, like, what matters to me? What's important in my life? I do believe that people are asking themselves this question with renewed intention, and that is great. And that may lead to the creation of new underground arts and culture. And I think people are questioning a lot right now. So that, I think, potentially could open the door to a lot of new, hopefully exciting and positive change.
So we have questions from first Gabriel, who wants to follow up on what you were just saying, Karen, and then Clarice after Gabriel.
Hi, hello, sure. Yes, just on that, I had a question about your impression with regards to networks between these different spaces. Say in Switzerland, I think you touched upon it a little bit, maybe in the Suisse romande, you mentioned, you know, how connected are they between themselves? Because that might be something important to sustain similar objective. But I think in the film, there are people who mentioned, well, you know, how do we do that? Whether the bigger the group, the more difficult it can become. And in generally also in, you know, also I know that in the Germanic speaking part also, or, you know, maybe we can go back to Ticino, there are different spaces, but sometimes it seems to me that they have difficulty kind of connecting together. And I was wondering how it felt on the ground talking to all these people.
Kevin, do you want to go or you want me to start?
Vas-y, Karen.
Okay. So I would say, yeah, so the part of the issue here is that a lot of these artists they want to do art, right? That's what they want to do. They don't want to do administration. They don't want to have to go to meetings and pitch their concepts. They don't want to have to like put together a dossier, like a report. Like, so part of this is like, you know, they just want to be making things. So to that degree, I think people are happy with their own little individual thing. That being said, I do think, you know, part of the reason for me personally I wanted to do this is because our art collective was having some internal struggles, and we were wondering about, like, are we structuring this correctly? How are other people doing this where it works, you know, where they're able to pay the rent every month and like they don't have internal fighting, and what structure do they use to keep it going and to finance it and all of that. And we kind of found out everyone does it a little bit differently, and every city is different, every space is different. And so unfortunately, there is no kind of global network to connect these people. It was a bigger dream of mine to create something like that, but I mean, I don't even know where to start. I think this documentary is a pretty good start, but at the end of the day, I think we'd all benefit from having some sort of a shared database where people could go to find out even things as simple as like security norms or insurance, weird stuff that like artists don't want to think about. But like if you're having a public space, I mean a public event, and you have 100 people there and you don't have proper fire exits. I mean, we've seen how there was a fire in Oakland a couple years ago, the Ghost Ship fire, an art space that burned down. I think 35 artists or people in the space died. It was a really big deal in the underground community. So this is an example of, you know, that's something that maybe through these networks, if you knew like, oh, well, we had such and such problem and we were able to speak to this legal team helped us. And, you know, I don't know, that sort of stuff could, if there was a shared knowledge base for artists where they could get help on that sort of stuff, administrative, like running a business. I think that could be useful. But yeah, I think they will always have sort of niche communities, and that's part of the beauty of it too.
Yeah, and most of the artists don't want to be on the list or don't want to be famous or just want to have their space and do what they like. It's not the point is not to become famous or to make a big structure. It's just to do what you like. That's the main point, I think. And to answer one of the first question, one difficulties of our documentary was also because a lot of places don't wanted us to film their space, especially in Lausanne. We had a lot of places who say no camera here. We don't want to speak about it. We just don't want to stay like we are, and no one have to bring a camera here.
Clarice, do you want to go ahead? And then we have a question from Alex in the chat that maybe he can follow Clarice.
Okay, I don't know. I was just, I wanted to link back with, I think, something that Karen said about art or this kind of, these kinds of movements being a way to get us out of our predicament as that we're in today. I typed in the title of a book that exactly has that title, Why Only Art Can Save Us, Aesthetics and the Absence of Emergency. And I think that somehow finding ourselves in this predicament where we can't get together, we can't produce, our work is limited, and all of these things come into relation with what art does. I don't know, it's not exactly a question, but maybe just a mutual reflection or some other comments that you can bring back on this observation of mine or whatever. So.
Yeah. I'll say quickly, or Kevin, do you want to go first? Okay. I mean, I do think that art is incredibly powerful, an incredibly powerful force for both the artist and the viewer. And I think it's part of what makes us human. I think it's like an inevitable part of the human condition or the human struggle. And I think that I think that this is an opportunity for arts to flourish. I know that I personally have found sanity by doing more art of my own, working on projects, embracing, imperfection and being like, well, I mean, I'm working on a sculpture right now. I've never made a sculpture before, but like, I just started this project. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do this. I feel inspired to do it. I'm going to do it. And it's like, it's given me something to focus on and work towards and be excited about. And I think it's important to find that in our lives, and everyone will find that in their own way. But I think we're all capable of being artists. And I think this situation does provide opportunity for that to flourish in each of us on our own, and hopefully collectively in the near future.
Yeah.
Alex, did you want to go ahead? Oh, sorry, Kevin. Go
ahead.
Wait,
Kevin, do you want to add?
No, I'm sorry.
Karen answered always the question I want to answer. It's okay. No, but I find the question really interesting because what art does for me, for example, is my opinion as artist. It helps me to express things I cannot express with simple words sometimes. It helps me to realize some curiosity, to try things, to just do things without to have the pretension to show it to everyone, just to let it down. Every time I make a short film, I feel really alive after that, because I have exchange with other friends, other artist friends, and we do something creative and we construct something together. It's maybe not changing the world, but it's expressing something through different ideas and collaborate about something we want to share with other people and see the reaction. Yeah, that's all.
Actually, just to add on to that before we go to the next question, I do think part of what's really important to me in this film is the freedom of expression. I think people tend to be very afraid to express themselves fully, often out of fear of judgment. Could be many things. I mean, we all have our reasons, but freedom of expression is really important and really helps us embrace who we are and find peace in our lives, and leads to some beautiful art. And I think that, yeah, a big part of my personal inspiration behind this film was focusing on looking at how these spaces help encourage freedom of expression and why that's important for us as people.
So they can see it.
Alex, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you very much that I can join this discussion and profit from your questions. Perhaps I will begin with this quotation of the film. It's not about refinding the alternative culture of the 90s, for example, but much more about alternative culture of now. And I just see that you focus your film about alternative space in the cities, which is very important to have a space of visibility for this alternative milieu in cities and to have a voice also in the cities. But I was also wondering because in Switzerland there are also many alternative spaces or ateliers in the outside, so in the land.
Mm-hmm.
And will you say something about such experiments that are also artistic, ethic, ecological, and political choices, and are not in the centers but more in the outside? I don't know if I'm clear, but
I think I understand your question. Why, although it's not only central in big cities, it can be in a small village as well.
Yes.
We had the Pantograph was one of the only one who was a bit outside of city. One of the problem we had, I would love to speak more about it, but there is not so much outside of the cities. The most of alternative space we know, at least, are centralized in big cities. Because to be alive to share it, you need to have some connection, and in small villages it's a bit more difficult. You need time, you need patience, and you need to be accepted. A lot of small village, although I don't want to make a generalization, but there is a more racistic way of thinking, more proud to be how you are than in cities where you can have a multi-culti experiment. Yeah. What do you think, Karen?
Yeah, I will add that it took us 2 years to find all of the spaces that are in our film. Part of the reason was because at the time, social media, websites, Switzerland was not super on top of all those digital forms of marketing, I guess you can say. Not to mention that most of these spaces don't care about marketing. They don't really, they might put up flyers or like posters in their town, but beyond that, they're not really trying to, become known on the internet or whatever. So part of our struggle was finding all the spaces. It was all word of mouth. We met a friend who said, oh, I know someone in Lausanne who's might know a space. And then we go to Lausanne and then we meet this person. And then this person says, oh, I'm going to introduce you to another person. And it's so it was a lot of word of mouth. And in the beginning, we were struggling to find spaces. I mean, there's a lot of alternative galleries and concert halls, but we limited it down to spaces that had art studios on site and hosted public events, because there's a lot of spaces that are just art studios, but they're not open to the public. And there are a lot of spaces that it's a public space for art, music, whatever, but they don't have artists working on site. So those two criteria were quite specific and limited a bit our search. But part of it was also because, we don't know where they are. You have to find them somehow. So I think if we had known about other ones, we would have been happy to include them in the film. But yeah, part of the struggle was trying to find them.
And if I can add something, we make some theater release, and it was the first time for me to make this kind of work. And only cinemas in big cities accepted the documentary, because the small village or places just say it will be interesting for no one, because no one does something like that in the area. And I try one cinema, and I make a lot of interviews, like 3 different medias. I speak a lot of people, and making a lot of effort. And at the end, there were 11 people in the theater. I think more people in cities are interested in this topic as well. That's why we see more, also in the documentary, also we see more alternative spaces in the big cities. I would say that.
Kate, do you want to ask a question?
Sure. It's actually a bit of a different direction that I'm really interested in the form of your film itself, and the way that you put the film together, particularly the way that you put the interviews together, because it seems to me that you've been talking a lot about collectives and shared ethos, and I feel like the form of the film and the way that you've edited the interviews reflects that, because you're not moving from one space to another. You seem to have shared themes that are being spoken about by all of the spaces together, and then you move to another theme, another question, and talk about that. Is that kind of what were your ideas behind the way that you put the film together and the interviews together?
I start, Karen?
Yeah, go for it.
With me. That's the idea, was not to have a voiceover, and that the people can explain the story by themselves. That was the main idea. And at the beginning, we were thinking, okay, the most people there is, the most bigger the movement is, and was to have a lot of different way to explain things, not only the topic, but the way they say. There is people who didn't say something really interesting, but it was so emotional, and we wanted to make it in a way the public can be attached by the people they see, and I think we made it. The second point was a bit difficult to make some archive going together and doesn't make too much difference with what we had, and we spent almost 2 years to find a way to make it. In 2014 or 15, I think, we showed the movie the first time with the first
rough cut.
And we wanted to have the feedback from the people, and it helped us to construct better and to go in a direction we really wanted to go. Something we also have to admit, it's at the beginning, the first day of shooting, I don't know if you remember, Karen, we didn't even know what will the documentary talk about. We knew it would be maybe about squat scene, maybe about concert place, and the more we shoot, the more we knew that we wanted to speak about alternative creative spaces where artists are creating things, and that's how we construct the movie. It was step by step, but with the idea what the people say is more interesting than if we are making a voiceover explaining people what is what. And it makes a collaboration at the end. You see a lot of people, you think they know each other, everyone know each other, but they didn't knew that other places exist. And now they make collaboration for real. We are quite proud of it.
Yeah, I want to add to what Kevin said by saying, so what you watched is the 52-minute edit of the film. This is the version that was sort of made for television and for online viewing. We have an 80-minute version of the film. That is the full feature. That's what aired in Montreux. That's what we've been showing in cinemas. And that is what has been submitted to most of the international film festivals. The 80-minute version of the film has a bit more separation between the spaces. It starts out on themes, then we dive into each space. Each space has like a title sequence that introduces the space, says where it is, says how many artists are in it, how big the space is, and when it was founded. So we provide a little bit more background on those spaces. But we just get like a mini kind of presentation of each space, and then we go back to this conversation of what do they have in common. And I think that that version of the film is best suited for Swiss audiences who know where Geneva is and where Moutier is. And like, you know, I think for international audiences, it is a lot of information that doesn't necessarily help shape the story for them, because a lot of people don't really know. I mean, they think of Switzerland and they just think Switzerland. And so to a certain degree, it was also about, you know, how can we make sure that we are geographically like representing this in a way that makes sense to the viewer. So that is part of that was, you know, yeah. And it had to be 52 minutes. That's the time required for a TV broadcast. So we had to make choices there to cut out, you know, there was stuff we had to cut. But yeah, ultimately, you know, the idea was the 80-minute version dives deeper into presenting each space and what makes each space unique, whereas this version concentrates more on the globality of the movement and what they all have in common.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Thanks.
You're welcome.
And so we next have a question about how you plan to share the film globally. I'm not sure who the person asked. Maybe you want to jump in, unmute yourself and jump in.
Hi, this is Joey Moffat. No, I was curious because I'm based right outside of New York City, and they have, you know, the consulate, Switzerland based in New York, and they weekly would send out arts and culture opportunities in New York. And I was just wondering if you were going to tap into that to show this film and have that available to the different consulates around the world, but also, do you know about, like, in Greenwich, Connecticut, they have something called the Alliance Française, and every year they have a film festival featuring different French films from, you know, from Belgium, Switzerland, France, Canada, Africa. And after seeing this, I just think this is different and would be a great opportunity for you. And I was just wondering what your plan is globally to promote this.
Kevin, do you want to go first?
You start, Karen, you go.
Okay. All right, so I will say, last year we did screen the film. So it had its global premiere at the Montreux Jazz Festival in June, end of June. And from that moment forward, we started submitting to film festivals. We submitted to around 80 film festivals internationally that were supposed to run through the end of 2020. But as you can imagine, most of the film festivals have been canceled, postponed, or on hiatus. So that has had a big impact on kind of where this film will be screened. We did screen at a film festival in New York called Art is Alive Film Festival. We actually won Best Cinematography.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we also screened, I'm living in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. In November, there was the Lancaster Red Rose Film Festival, and we also screened at that film festival here. Lancaster is quite an art-forward city. It was a really good fit for the film. But so the way film distribution typically works is you do cinematic release first, followed by film festivals, or kind of those go simultaneously. Then you do TV broadcast, then you do video on demand, which is internet. And if you skip any stage of that, like you can't go backwards. You can only go this way. So once you make the film available publicly on the internet, your opportunities for theatrical release or TV broadcast are basically void. Unfortunately, that has been what we have seen as we learned about the film distribution process. People are really concerned about premieres A lot of the festivals will not accept a film that has been publicly available in, for example, the tri-state area, stuff like that. So some of this is not our choice. It's kind of where and this has been really eye-opening and also frustrating at times to see this system that's in place for how you're supposed to do this. And yeah, so I think moving forward, I'd like to hear what Kevin has to say. We're sort of figuring it out because obviously our plan for this year is kind of up in the air now. And we've been looking into how can we get this film out there if we're not doing film festivals anymore. Should we just move forward and get it online? We've approached a couple TV stations, but no one's really wanting to invest right now in this kind of thing. So it's, yeah, I'd like to hear what Kevin has to say too about this.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult. The main fight we have in this movie is to show the movie to people who are not interested by the topic. And the best door for it, it's TV. Sorry. Now TV need a lot of time. We write 2 weeks ago, although Karen write 2 weeks ago to some different TVs. We may try again and phone them. That was actually what we were planning to try Arte, RTS. RTS already say no, unfortunately. And some different TV in Europe, especially. What we wanted to try, but it doesn't really exist right now, it's to try a VOD and people pay what they want to pay. The Radiohead, it's very famous, but try to do something like that. And one album, they do it on the internet and people can have it for free or pay what they want. I think we want to try like this because it's going in the way of our documentary. And we just want to try something to make it possible to be seen. At the end, today we don't know exactly. As I said you at the beginning, we started this experience without any this adventure without any experience. Sorry, and now we have some experience, but we still don't know exactly how it works. And I think we need some time still to fix it. One of the idea I had this year was to create a festival in Switzerland, for example, and to go in different cities and to show it in different wall of the cities where people don't use to make art show. Like it will be a kind of street art for cinema, and people come and sit and pay what they want. I want to use this documentary to try something new, as distribution today is changing. Everything is changing very fast, and no one really knows, even people with a lot of experience, how it will be in 5 or 10 years to show movies and to find an audience. And we are trying by doing by ourselves.
I mean, if you have suggestions, we are super open to them. I think the traditional models are all up in the air right now more so than ever. The movie industry was already facing a lot of uncertainty with the way internet streaming was coming in. Theater viewership has kind of been down. Like the whole model, the whole system of distribution it was kind of in crisis, in my opinion. And no one's really figured out how to bring it up to speed with the way things currently are. So technology is changing a lot. There's a lot of new options out there. I mean, we looked into options for trying to do like a watch party for today's viewing, for example. And a lot of the available tools require that your video be publicly available on the internet, which we're just not ready to do in case we can negotiate a TV broadcast. So that was a little bit frustrating. We just went the old school way, like, here's the link, watch it on your own, like, and it worked, but it would have been really cool to have like a premiere online with a little countdown and know that we were all watching it together for that kind of collective experience. But unfortunately, the technology we needed to do that wasn't available for us right at this moment. So
can I ask one question? How do we get in touch with you? Will the school send your email to the list of participants on this call so we can chat offline?
We will figure something out so that you can contact Karen, we promise.
Thanks, Sarah.
Very diplomatic, right?
Yes.
Perfect.
I thought maybe we could come back to our two students who had a lot of questions to maybe ask our final two questions as we get close to the end here. Daniela or Letizia, do you want to maybe ask another question?
Yeah, sure. So my takeaway message of this documentary that we are hard, but at the same time, I see the struggle from society to accept these alternative spaces and the heart itself. So my question is, why do we reject ourselves? And why is human nature afraid to freely express itself?
Because of judgment.
Yeah.
We're always afraid of judgment, what people think. I think the first step to do is to think for yourself and to do things without to be afraid of what people will think about what we do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Karen?
I 100% support, yeah, exactly what Kevin said. I think fear of judgment is the number one reason and the number one thing we do to block ourselves. It's pretty silly.
Okay.
Daniela? Sorry, Daniela, do you have a maybe last question for us?
Sure. I mean, just to make a small remark, if you need any help in regards of getting the documentary out in Lugano, I can help you with that. I'm very much well connected with the alternative scene here. But my question is more towards, I've been speaking to a bunch of friends of mine who are like into the alternative culture, and I've seen, well, a point that you make in the documentary is in regards to politics and how it really depends what political party the town hall is. And I thought that was interesting how you referenced that, but also how you think if it really depends on the political party that is in charge, for example, in Geneva, who accepts or doesn't accept. And for example, in Lucerne, they have a left-green party and they're more accepting. Whereas in Lugano, you have a right-wing political party who is kind of accepting, but is not really accepting at the same time. But I don't know, that's more towards my question, towards, do you think that's related to the case in the French-speaking side of Switzerland and the spaces you showed in this case? I don't know if that made sense, but I hope it did somehow.
Go ahead.
I just want to be sure to understand the question. If politics can have an influence on alternative space, or?
Yes. If you think that it really depends also on who is in charge of the town hall, it will put less of a fight. You also say that, well, a recurring theme is the fight for people to keep those spaces. And I guess, yeah, that's my question.
I think first of all, it depends more on how many people want to create something together before to have politics involved. I think politics is not nothing, but it's something who can help going faster and finding ways in an easier way. That's the case in, for example, in La Chaux-de-Fonds or in Bienne, who are two cities where alternative are really accepted. But even if the politics are against it, I think about Bern, for example, there is a lot of politics against it, but they still are here in Tareles, for example, and they still have their idea. It's not so easy to keep it out because a lot of people are here. I think that the number what matters. I don't think like hundreds of people. I would say 10 or 20 people together can really create something, even if politics are not helping it. Politics is good to help to go faster, or to let open doors for alternative way of thinking and more understandable for large public. But I will say also time is a thing when you don't have politics, it's time what matters, and how strong you believe in your conviction at the end. If you have a project, like I think about cinema, if you want to be cinematographer, you have the idea to become it, but if you don't stay motivated during 10 years, you will never become a cinematographer, because it needs at least 10 years to understand how it works and how it's going on. A lot of people give up after 1 or 2 years, even after the first project. It's the patience and how you really believe in what matters and what is important in your life before politics.
Yeah, I'm going to just add to what Kevin said. If the politicians in your town or city appreciate and understand the intrinsic value of art communities, that helps. It helps for these communities to exist. It helps them to find funding. It helps them to get promotion. It helps, you know, with all that stuff. In some cases in our film, some of those spaces receive a subvention, like a grant from the city. Some of them, like the city gives them the building for free. They're allowed to be there. They don't pay rent. But they get a discount on the rent, or, you know, they get some money from the city to support their cultural activities because they are recognized as a cultural institution. But in many places that's not the case, and it's not necessary. I agree with everything Kevin said, that like the bigger the group of people and the more passionate and determined they are, they will make something happen regardless of politics. But yeah, if the politicians are on your side and can see that, you know, we discussed how that, a lot of these spaces, they don't bring in money the way a traditional company does, and they're not a big cultural institution like a museum. So some politicians find it difficult to see the value because there's no monetary value that you can associate with that. But so it is helpful to have people in power and positions of power who recognize the non-monetary value of culture and of art. But I do think that that's something that goes beyond politics. It doesn't actually matter really your politics if you have that perspective. You can be from any politics and appreciate culture and art. But it certainly helped. That I think is the key, more so than which party. Obviously, some parties are just maybe more naturally inclined to see the value versus others. But yeah, and this is a very politically charged conversation in Switzerland. And we have been asked before, why didn't you talk more about the politics behind this? And the truth is that, like, we wanted, at least for me, I can only speak for myself, but I wanted to make a documentary about art and the power of art to bring people together, regardless of their differences, regardless of their politics, their age, their race, their language, and focus on that positive thing. And if we had chosen to address the politics, I think that that could be its own documentary in of itself. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's the perfect place to end our discussion. I just want to thank everyone for joining our first virtual University Day. I can't imagine a better way to have done it. Thank you so much to Karen, to Kevin, and to all of you who called in. We'll make sure that we get this up if you want to share with people so that they can listen to or watch the discussion. We'll make sure it's available to everyone. And thanks again for joining. And Franklin We Stand. Remember to post your social media, hashtag Franklin We Stand. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.